rough feedback is the ultimate life hack. What do
Oh,
starving artists and creatively stifled entrepreneurs have in common? And I also just today am finishing this 12-week life experiment. I mean, that could be a
okay.
whole topic for us because it literally finished just now. And it's been going on for the past 84 days. So
Cool.
it's just Julia Cameron's book, The Artist's Way, which she outlines in a
Um,
life experiment. And I just did it. And it was fucking amazing.
so just to let you know, we're already live on YouTube. I think I accidentally jumped the gun,
Oh, that's so nice.
but it's all good. Okay, based on everything you just said, like let's just flow, have a good conversation. I do like ADHD, neurodivergent, digital nomadism as a spiritual practice, like and then we can just vibe and flow, and then how having a VA has like fundamentally like transformed your life and giving you a lot of time back in your day. I think that would be super interesting.
Yeah, that sounds great.
Okay.
So, how long have we been live for? The past few minutes?
No, just for like 30 seconds.
Cool.
Oh my God. So funny.
Perfect.
Uh,
Well,
wait, what
I'm
is
super happy to be here. And one reason that I'm happy to be here is because I was just, I don't know if it caught this on the live video, but one thing that I just was recounting from my notes there was this concept of anamkara, which is taking on friendship as a spiritual practice. And I feel
mm,
like our friendship has evolved in such beautiful ways
aw.
over the past couple of years. And
Yeah.
the way that you do friendship is, I'm gonna just alter the screen so I can see you a little bit better here. The way that you do friendship, Davidson, is
Aw.
something that I just really respect. And you are so
Aw.
good at just witnessing your friends, no matter how far away they are, and just holding the thread with them as you both
Aw.
grow. And that's something that you've done for me. So
Ah, thanks, Abby. Yeah, I think it's awesome because we both have grown so much since we met each other. I think like your curiosity, your creativity, like listening to your music is just beautiful. And then the way, yeah, you have a very like you have a free spirit, but it's funny because then you're also super productive, and it's just interesting to see like the dynamic, like you're very like deep in a lot of, it's hard to like put you in a box. I feel like you're very much like an explorer, an adventurer, like a wanderlust, but then you also have this like achiever side in you as well. So it's quite interesting.
that's so sweet. Thank you, hon. I appreciate that.
Yeah. But yeah, so just for context, so how Abby and I know each other is we met through the team management leadership program, which is it's like a year-long crazy self-development program, and it's been a wild ride. I feel like that year was crazy. Oh, you're still in it, right? You're still
I took a pause for the quarter, so I'm gonna go back into it in a month, and I have three
okay.
quarters left, so nearly a year left of it. It's like a 1 year program
Okay.
that you can do twice, essentially, and then it ends up
Yeah.
being a 2 year program. So you did the full 2 years.
I completed it. So I only did one quarter of the second year,
Got it.
but I'm in the partnership exploration course, which is the for people who don't know, Landmark is this like super self-development community where I think there's like millions of people that have done it at this point, and that's where Abby and I met, and we stayed in touch, and we've kind of witnessed each other to multiple transformations. It seems like so it's been interesting to stay in touch with you and see you grow and
Mm-hmm. Oh, you're
curiosity.
going mute a little bit, by the way.
Oh,
Every once in a
sorry.
blue moon it goes silent.
Yeah, I keep accidentally hitting the cord on my mic.
No problem. But I agree with you. It's been so fascinating watching you grow over the past few years since we met.
Yeah. Um, but yeah, so I'm curious, right? So like let's start off with so those of you who are tuning in, I think what you'll get from this podcast episode and this YouTube is, and I'll post it all over all the social medias as well, right? I think you'll learn to explore and not be afraid to take risk and not be afraid to travel the world. You'll learn to be more curious, love yourself more, and continue to venture and try new things and not be afraid to take a leap of faith. I have a feeling you'll get a lot from this conversation.
I love it.
Awesome. So, tell me about your experience in Mexico, right? I think many of us like aspire to travel to a different country where we don't know anyone, but most people don't actually do it. What made you choose Mexico specifically, and what was that experience like?
Thank you so much for asking about Mexico. So I left Mexico maybe 5 or 6 months ago and moved to Seattle, Washington. But zooming out a couple of layers, it wasn't so much just about Mexico as it was wanting to try being a digital nomad and this whole experience of just traveling full time and living in different locations. That started when I read Tim Ferriss's 4 Hour Work Week book when I was in college. How old were you when you read that one, Davidson? When did you read that for the first time?
Hmm. Yeah, I think it was 23 was when I read it, and I don't think it made any sense honestly when I read it, but now it's like, oh wow, like I feel like I'm living some of what he's teaching us.
Mm-hmm. I read it for the first time, I think, when I was about 21, and I just immediately put it on repeat as soon as it was done. I listened to it so many times, and
Hmm.
I knew I just had to try that many components of how he does life experiments out, including living in different countries. So one of my very best friends lives in Mexico. I decided to try that out because I visited her, and she lives in this beautiful, very charming little city called San Miguel de Allende that absolutely you just have to go to if you've never been. It's so, so charming and so enchanting and beautiful. So
Hmm.
colorful. The streets are all cobblestone, and it is a colonial city. So it has European
Hmm.
architecture. The people there are just absolutely wonderful and so kind
Hmm.
and so welcoming. So anyway, I went there, and I think Mexico, I was there for about a year, and it was a really important life experiment for me. I learned so
Hmm.
much from that. And I think it goes to our broader conversation about life experiments and what they are and how to design one for yourself.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
I'll just talk about that really briefly. For me, what a life experiment is anytime you design your own immersive program where you decide you want to change something in your life. And so you define some parameters around that, and then you just go for it. And you create an experience that's unlike what you've been previously living, with the
Hmm.
intention of living outside of your comfort zone, living outside of the box that you've been familiar with, and
Hmm.
basically separating yourself from this firmly established, hard grooved identity that you've been in
Hmm.
before. So whether it's living somewhere else for 1 year, there's so many other weird, crazy ones that I've tried that many of them I would definitely not do again. Some of them are amazing and I'm going to definitely repeat them. I'll be exploring them forever. But I feel like life experiments have been such an important part of my path. And
Hmm.
I would love to talk to you about that today and just like dig into it. Maybe we could even design one for you.
Hmm. Yeah, so many takeaways already. I think, we're both ENFPs. So for people who don't know what ENFP is, we're like the adventurers, like you can call it shiny object syndrome, or you can call it we just love to experiment and we just love experiencing different things, whether it's traveling, whether it's like learning. We're just seekers.
Mm,
So yeah, that'd be cool. I'm down to do that. Let's
yeah.
do that.
Okay, cool. So let me share a little story so that we can get some background on this and why this got started in my life. I
Hmm.
began this process for the first time when it was right out of college. I was living in LA, and I had someone in my life who was struggling with addiction, addiction to alcohol. And that's never been my particular struggle. It's never been alcohol has never been something that I've That hasn't been a part of my story, but I'm super empathetic to it and
Mm,
have, been around alcoholism a good bit. And
mm,
I realized, okay, I am not addicted to a particular substance, but are there certain things in my life, certain tendencies that I gravitate towards without thinking
mm,
that are derailing me,
mm,
that I've come to take for granted and I've come to reach for second nature? But if I take a closer look, they're not really nurturing my path. They're self-destructive, right?
mm.
So I took a piece of paper, and this is what we could do with you, dudes, and this is what anybody who's listening.
Okay.
I took a piece of paper, and what I did was I wrote down everything that I was addicted to on a
Mm.
list, and I just brain dumped it all into a list.
Ooh, okay.
And I went so deep with this. I mean, I wrote things down, of course, like sugar, eating
Mm.
late, salt. I heard that, I heard somewhere, I can't verify this at all, but that sleeping with a pillow wasn't good for your spine. So I wrote down
Huh.
pillows. I was like, I'm going all in with this. And what I decided to do was I decided to cold turkey give up everything on that
Huh.
list for 84 days. Why 84? Simply because I
Hmm.
had heard that 12 weeks, you can form a new habit in full in 12 weeks. I'd heard
Nice.
that somewhere. Maybe I'd read it. So I thought,
Okay.
what would I be, hypothetically, who would I be on the other side of not having done any of this stuff for 84 days? That would
Hmm.
be unfathomable to me.
Hmm.
Um, because ultimately I just felt that the way that I was living my life was not corresponding with the goals that I had.
Hmm.
So I wrote all that stuff down, and then I just stopped all of it. And I took a cold shower every day for good measure, which was terrible. But it was also, I think, an important part of it. So that was my very first one.
Huh.
And I'm telling you, that was really life-changing for me. It was really life-changing because it gave me
Hmm.
such a feeling of control over my life, such a feeling of control over
Hmm.
my experience, of my personal power. I heard someone say recently that um I'm trying to remember this quote. Maybe you're familiar with it, Davidson, but it was something like integrity is, oh, sorry, what is it? Self-esteem is simply the reputation that you have with yourself, the reputation you have with keeping your own promises to yourself. Specifically, that's
Hmm.
what self-esteem is. So I know you and I are really passionate about integrity and having conversations around integrity and being your word and all of that. But if we think about building and constructing our lives, starting first with the relationship that we have with the word that we give to what we're going to do and our actions lining up with our words, but just beginning with the relationship with self first, it's crazy how you can start to design a much better life.
Hmm. Wow, so many takeaways. Yeah, it's well, first of all, that's inspiring and like writing everything I'm addicted to. I think that would take up like the remainder of the so I'll spare everyone the um that's cool. Yeah, sugar, that's definitely like an addiction. I mean, I love how like you're always playing, right? Like you're always thinking about like I think so much of our society like we don't take chances, we don't take risks, right? I'm not sure if it's like the ADHD or the ENFP or just like being neurodivergent, but it does seem like you're able to experiment and you don't think, oh, like are people going to judge me? Are people going to
Mm.
like you know what I mean? Like it just seems like your willingness to try different things is it's inspiring. Yeah.
Thank, thank you so much. And I'm not perfect about that at all, worrying if people are going to judge what I'm doing, etc. There was this one life experiment that
Hmm.
I did because I really felt like I was uh constrained by perfectionism. where I decided to create and release a short film every day for 84 days. And
Wow.
this is definitely one of those life experiments that I would not do again because it was not very good for my sleep. I mean, maybe I'll try it again if I have some good systems in place. I'm sure I can figure it out. But the
Hmm.
way that I was doing it then was not quite the systems oriented approach, right? I would sometimes not even start filming the video until 11 p.m. because I'm like, oh
Hmm.
God, I didn't have time to do it. And then I start at 11 and I finish it at 2 in the morning. And then so
Hmm.
this definitely had some complications, but the whole breakthrough of it is that you set it up where it's going to be harder than you know how to it's going to confront you. It's going to cause you
Hmm.
to say to yourself, no way, I can't do this anymore. I got to stop.
Hmm.
Not from a place of this isn't good for me, but from a place of this is so freaking frustrating. I just want to throw my hands up in the air. Right? If it feels unhealthy, stop. But if
Hmm.
it's just
Hmm.
aggravating you and confronting you, look deeper, lean in. So
Hmm.
yeah, I released a video every single day. I actually really recently unarchived them because they were all on YouTube archived. I had to like put them up, and at the end of the 84 days, I archived all of them. So I just randomly unarchived them, and it was so cathartic to go through and watch some of these videos
Aw.
of this period of time.
Hmm.
So, but with all that said, Davidson, the um the stuff around what are other people going to think, etc. That's real, and you can experiment with that too to see what's actually real and what's not.
Hmm.
There's a great book that I read a couple of times called Rejection Proof by Jia Jiang. He
Oh
talks
yeah.
Have
Oh,
you read it?
so
He talks about a
I
life
love
experiment
it.
where yes. So what this guy did was he sought being rejected every day for 100 days, and then he
Hmm.
filmed it and put it online. And by the end of this 100-day experiment that he ran, he was on daytime TV. He got his wife a job at Google. He did all this
Hmm.
crazy stuff. So
It-
yeah, anything can be
Yeah,
tried.
we're definitely on the same. I love him. Like that was probably one of the most inspiring books, and just watching his videos on YouTube and online, and it was just like, I was just like, you feel for the guy, right? And then, but the crazy thing is, he was like winning. Like he was just like, it got bigger and bigger, and then you're just like, man, like this is so inspiring.
Inspiring.
That's awesome, and good for you to do like, yeah, 84. It's scary. Like I think video is is probably the most vulnerable out of all the media platforms, right? Because at least with voice, like you can hide a little bit, right? Like they all have their different like unique, but video, that's the hardest thing for me to crack, honestly. Like I feel like I'm just not good at it, or like it's just taking me a while to figure out the video game.
Absolutely. Do you do you imagine that there's going to be a certain point where it just feels so comfortable and so good and so easy? Or
Yeah.
think that the overcoming the little bit of overcoming that mentally is actually a part of why you want to do it because
Mm.
it keeps you in this state of growth.
100%. Yeah, we get each other. It's like most people like they don't want to do something they're really, really bad at, but I'm like the worst at video. So like let me just try that, right? So it's like I'm starting from -20, I would say. So it's like, but that's what makes it so interesting. Like, oh man, like I spent at this point 300 hours in the last like couple months just like trying to study everything I can about how to get better. But it's there's so many layers to it that I'm like, yes, this is awesome because it will take me 10 years to like get really, really good at this.
It's so cool because you've been doing YouTube and podcasting for as long as I've known you, but it does feel like lately, I don't know what the exact day was or exactly how many months or weeks ago it was, but you started doubling down in a way that really does feel like an immersive life experiment. Have
Hmm.
have you thought about it in that way, or have you designated a certain amount of time? Not where at the end of this amount of time you're going to ease up, but just to kind of track milestones where, okay, let's see
Hmm.
that after blank amount of weeks or days, etc.
Yeah, yeah. I feel like video is like the hardest thing for me. Like this is the hardest thing I've ever had to learn in my life so far. Like I would say I've been relatively more successful in a lot of my other ventures, and this just feels like I'm just failing left and right. But
Mhm.
I do think I'm so nowhere near where I want to be. So I think it's gonna be a really long time. But yeah, I think in typical ENFP fashion, I'll get to a point where I'm like, okay, I feel like I'm good enough, and then I'll probably venture to, New York Times bestsellers next or whatever it is, right? Monetizing the podcast. Like there's
Mhm.
like other channels that I would want to focus on.
I love that. Cool. And I have another question for you. When it comes to habits in your life, how do you do it? Are you a big New Year's resolution person? Do you have a certain cadence where you take
Hmm.
story of your good habits, of your habits that maybe you want to change a little bit? Do you have certain people that you talk to
Hmm.
about habits? Do you ever use a habit tracker? What is behavior
Hmm.
change and just habits? What does that look like in your world?
It's funny because like in the world of high achievers and productivity, right, which we're both very, very well versed in, right? Being that, like your experience with Athena and mine just being in like the tech world and tech sales where people are making, anywhere from 500,000 to 1 million. And it seems like that's like the norm, right? But it's like, no, these people are just really have really strong, healthy habits that they have perfected or they've been
Mm,
practicing for 50 years or whatever, how long it took them to get there. Um, and I feel like and similar to you, I've paid way too much and have tried way too many programs. And I realized like it was coming from a place of like not enough, from a place of like lack. So now I'm less concerned about habits because I think I'm at a point now where like I'll always have healthy habits. It's like almost like I've been brainwashing myself to have quote unquote healthy habits. But now I guess I'm in a place where it's more like, oh, how do I integrate more of like my like freedom and like silliness and play and like integrating more of that because I do think like I can go down the rabbit hole of being ultra productive and ultra like and only thinking about healthy habits, right? Where I'm not gonna lie, like during the past like 3 weeks, I have been experimenting with more like what you would say like not healthy habits, right? Whether it's like experimenting with um active substances or just like going out partying and like going to clubs, like and I love it. And I'm like, oh wow, like I don't want to go far off like I don't want to go where I'm too much of a goody two shoe where I don't do any of this stuff. So it's been interesting trying to experiment and like what's the balance and
right.
yeah, it's like, also being responsible for the impact I might have as well.
I'm so curious about that. Everything that you just said. There's this another book that's coming to mind. I forget if we've talked about this before, Davidson, but it's The Slight Edge by Jeff Olson. Have you checked out this
Oh
book?
yeah, yeah.
So Jeff Olson, he was the mentor to Darren Hardy, who I'm not sure if he's still the CEO of Success Magazine. Is he still? I'm not sure. But Darren Hardy wrote The Compound Effect, and they're very cohesive books. They're not the same, but they work really well together. And I'd read The Compound Effect a bunch of times,
Mhm.
which is basically talking about thinking about your habits the way that you think about investing money.
Hmm.
And Jeff Olson's um, whole book and his whole premise was it rang so true with what you were just saying, Davidson. Basically, that we need no additional information. We have
Hmm.
everything that we need inside of us already. We've learned all of it.
Hmm.
That's not the problem.
Hmm.
The big thing for us to recognize when it comes to some of this stuff is that if you look at yourself and if you look at the people in your life, or if you look at a lot of people, most people, and you zoom out, you can see that there are certain ways in which their success in their life can kind of go like this,
Hmm.
And so even if from afar it looks like, oh man, no, this person's just winning, 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 winning. The closer you
Hmm.
are to people, the more that you can sometimes see, they go through rough patches and then they are doing really well and they're killing it and then they kind of fall off.
Hmm.
And this just happens with all of us. So what Jeff
Hmm.
Olson was teaching in this book is he says, here's why. It's because when we are invigorated to accomplish something and we're feeling motivated, we have a strong vision, and we're not there yet,
Hmm.
but we see it in view, we tend to work out. We tend to eat really healthy. We tend to
Hmm.
say, all right, this is exactly what I need to do every single day in order to achieve that. And so we are consistent with these habits. And then once we get to the top of the mountain there, there's a tendency to say, okay, cool, I can skip a day.
Hmm.
Okay, I can skip another day, right? Until you've been skipping so many days so frequently with whatever it is that you start going, wait a second, how did I get down here all of a sudden? I have
Hmm.
gained some weight, or
Hmm.
God, I'm just so dehydrated. I used to be drinking 8 cups of water a day. Now I feel like it's
Hmm.
5, or my sleep has just gotten so off track. How did that even happen? I'd been so good
Hmm.
about sleep, and now it's been late, but then still getting up early for so many days in a row. And now I just don't feel so vitalized during the workday. Whatever it
Hmm.
is, we can kind of look at it from this lens. And so what
Hmm.
the point he was making around this was the solution, one of the biggest solutions to any problem that we have is just keep it boring. Keep it
Hmm.
simple, keep it boring. What are the fewest things that cause
Hmm.
success for you? And can you just
Hmm.
commit to them relentlessly? And so when we're looking at this stuff, I'm so sure we both have a lot of people in our lives that they are just whatever, they get up at 4:30 in the morning. They're like stacking their entire day with all these little 5-minute increments. I don't think it's that, right? So what's
Hmm.
the minimum viable product version that's
Hmm.
going to give you a healthy life so that you can live and work in the spirit of play, but you can still
Hmm.
be, keeping consistent with your wellness and everything like that. I think it's such an interesting philosophical conversation.
Yeah, what you're saying reminds me of Alex Hermosi. He always says like everyone's looking for like the fanciest, like, oh, AI this, SaaS this, software company this, right? But he's like the most boring businesses are the ones that are like the most consistent, right? Because like you're always gonna have to like, what like the most boring businesses, right? Like you're people are always gonna have to get a haircut. People always will, just certain things that are mandatory. And he says, to your point, just it's not that it's not that difficult, right? It's like just do one thing and do it really well and continue and just keep doing it because 99.9% of people will quit because they're just like, oh, like this is boring. But he's
Mhm.
like, boring is actually the thing that will have you be more successful than everyone else because everyone's looking for the next like exciting industry to get into, or that's like, oh, let me go to this software company, maybe I'll become a billionaire. But he's like, dude, like most of those never work out. But he said, and then Jim, he became filthy rich from gyms, right? It's like that's been around for forever, right? So what you're saying reminds me of a lot of what Alex Hermosi is teaching us and why he's gone viral a lot lately.
I really like him. My stepdad right now is coming to mind for me when I hear you say this. My stepdad Steve is such a cool, introverted, stoic, scholarly guy, and he keeps it so simple in his life. And he's an
Hmm.
entrepreneur, but he has a very simple business model, and he is successful and chill and down to earth, and everybody gets along with him. He's just such a good stand-up dude, very quiet.
Hmm.
And one thing that he's been doing for the past, trying to think, maybe 10 years now, is he has a personal trainer that he goes to 3 days a week. And
Hmm.
he is 71 now, and he's just maintained this. And
Hmm.
his personal trainer is actually the family personal trainer. So many people in our family go to this guy. He comes to Thanksgiving. He's awesome. He came to my cousin's wedding in France. And
Hmm.
the personal trainer moved to Morocco. He's from Morocco. He moved back to Morocco during COVID. And so Steve built
Hmm.
a gym in the basement and got the computer set up so that he could keep doing the personal training sessions with Kareem 3 days a week. And he just made
Wow.
it this whole vibe in the basement of the house. So
Hmm.
then the other day during the holidays, my family had a couple of people over, and there was a couple of people that were a little bit younger than him. And I noticed that they were just really having trouble walking down the stairs, and they were kind of griping about their joint pain and stuff like this. And that was when it really hit me that, oh my
Hmm.
God, Steve has just been consistently pouring into this
Hmm. Hmm.
compound compounding effect with the fitness
Hmm.
that he's so much healthier than all these people and he's
Hmm.
way older than all of them. And I was amazed in that moment by how
Huh.
he doesn't make it dramatic or complicated or call any attention to it, but he just never
Hmm.
one of those days.
That's an inspiring story. It made me reflect on because I think people look at my community and they're like, oh, how does he have like 17,000 connections on LinkedIn or how does he have whatever, right? But it's like to your point, like that didn't happen overnight, right? That's like having 17,000 of these types of conversations all the time, right? Like it wasn't like I woke up one day and I became like a LinkedIn influencer, you know? And I think to your point, it's like, no, I just have grinded that much. And that's why, people are like, oh, you know everyone. But it's like people don't realize how much energy and attention and care I put into my relationships, right? People just see from outside, like, oh, must be nice. Like you can get a job anywhere. It's like, yeah, because I like
Because
have spent
I'm
10,000
so
hours on
committed.
it.
Yeah. Wow. I
Yeah.
have some questions for you about that. Hearing you say this is so good for me because what I said at the very beginning of this conversation about how you are so good with
Hmm.
up with your friendships when you're across the country from another person, right? This
Hmm.
is actually so weird, Davidson. You and I have never hung out in person. We've
That is
never hung out.
weird.
We've
That's
never met
so
in person.
weird.
I just
Yeah.
realized it. But I
Huh.
just realized it because I forgot. Because
Huh.
feel that I'm such a part of your life. I really know what's going on with you. I really
Hmm.
know what your goals are. I know what you're dealing with. You know,
Hmm.
I know about your relationship and what's important to you. And I feel like I'm a
Hmm.
part of your life because I think you're
Hmm.
very gifted at this the art of communicating with people in a way that's not super I don't know, it doesn't seem to be really time consuming for you. It's just easy. And a lot of people
Hmm.
they procrastinate on it and then their friendships, they have really important people that they just lose the thread with, you know?
Hmm.
How do you have so many connections in your life. What are some systems that cause it all to maintain as beautifully as it does? Do you spend a few hours a day just going through your LinkedIn mini feed and saying, "Oh, I haven't talked to this person."
Hmm.
Reach out to them. Do you keep track of people's birthdays? Like, what are some of the things that
Hmm.
you do that cause you to maintain all these relationships in a way that comes across as being easy, even though it may not be as easy as.
Hmm. That's a really good question. Um, I, it's funny because like I resist like the word like systems and like
Mhm.
because like to me it just
Those are
feels
great.
very like
Mhm.
corporate-y, but I see where you're coming from, right? I think like my framework or my mental model is like I just am just genuinely curious, right? Like when I like chat with you, for instance, I'm like, oh my God, like she's doing so many cool things, like like so for me, it's just like a genuine like I just love you, right? And I love a lot of people, so it's just like it's just genuine. So I don't necessarily think I mean, if I was to like put like a more of like a workshop or a course together, then I'd be like just to make it easier for people that, this is sometimes like networking or relationship building feels like taxing for a lot of people. So I would make it simple for them. I'd say like I think of it as like A, B, and C, right? A, people are like folks that I want to keep in touch with like pretty frequently, right? So like folks that I will make a conscious effort of like singing happy birthday to them, like, when I send a voice note or, sending them like, my books whenever they come out, whatever it is, right? Like just try to like be more conscious about it. And then B are folks that like I want to interact with like maybe once every like 3 or 4 months, right? So, and it could just be like a quick coffee, like in person. And then C are folks that like I still want to keep in touch with because like I do think like they're just interesting people that but we might not ever work together or we might not ever collaborate or anything like that. But it's like in an industry that I know nothing about, and I'm just like curious. Like, I'm like, oh, if I ever have a question about like structural engineering, like I have a guy that I can ask questions. It's just like, that's
Yeah,
how I think about it.
I love that. Do you keep all of your contacts in some kind of a personal CRM system? Do you just have
Mm,
a face pop up in your head and you go, oh, I haven't talked to this person in a year, I'll reach out right now?
mm,
Or is there a way in which
mm,
you serendipitously encounter the people that you're going to reach out to today?
mm. I think I'm very lucky, right? Because even like with you, you're pretty good about reaching out to me, right? So I think I've invested so much in my relationships that I like it sounds
Yeah.
weird, but I don't have to reach out as much anymore. But I would say for like a good 15 years from 20, I would say from 18 to like actually probably 15 to 30. So for those 15 years, right? I'm 36 now. So when I was 15 to 31, I was like super like proactive where like 99.9% of my friends, I would always be the one that would reach out and and it was like I'm not gonna lie, like I it was exhausting, like, but I didn't like now analyzing it, it's like, oh wow, like that was exhausting. But because I was being very like people pleasing and I was just like I just would needed the validation from people. So I just like wanted to go above and beyond in terms of my friendships,
Mhm.
connecting people together. But now that I'm older, like I'm glad all that like happened, right? Because like I can work at any like let's say like I mean I'm sure this will work out, but let's just say like I suck as an entrepreneur and like in 3 years, like I'm like, oh well, I guess back to the corporate stuff. I'll be fine. Like I'll be able to work at any company pretty much just because like I've built a lot of like decent relationships.
Mhm. 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 Wow. That's so beautiful. And I get how thinking about your relationships in terms of systems could almost feel impersonal and cold. That's so not the vibe. But I love how, even though it's so personal and it's so close to your heart, and it's so organic that it just happens naturally, you don't have to keep track of it. It's just a
Hmm.
natural arising with all of your relationships.
Hmm.
The most, it's it's such a big part of what can make you successful. So that's a really incredible, that's just a really incredible thing to kind of zoom out and consider, you know,
I'm
relationship for
I'm
everything.
curious, like what's your version of that, right? What is like what's the 10,000 hours that like a
Mhm.
specific thing or skill that you've been super intentional about being masterful at?
Yeah. So I don't quite have 10,000 hours in this yet, but the reason that I even asked the question about systems is because for the past couple of years I've been working with this company called Athena, and so I do executive coaching with many of their clients, and I do executive coaching with founders and C-suite executives, specifically around building life experiments that involve delegating, working more effectively with their
Hmm.
teams, delegating to virtual executive assistants overseas, and just
Hmm.
using design thinking and behavior change principles to
Hmm.
make these 2 millimeter shifts to their external and internal environments, right? Like, how do you take really good care of yourself and make these little tweaks to your environment such that your environment pulls for the kind of person that you want to be? It pulls for the behavior that we're looking for. It pulls
Hmm.
for the kind of life that you want to have. It invites the
Hmm.
life that you want to have. And I do this every day, basically. Wednesdays I
Hmm.
don't do client calls. So I didn't do it today. But
Hmm.
every work day, I am just coaching people one after another on how to build life experiments for them in their lives, and how to think about delegation,
Hmm.
and how to think about systems, and how to think about any problem as an engineering problem. So we
Hmm.
go, okay, you're out of shape. Let's look at that from another perspective, and let's design something really fun for you that you would actually love, or whatever it is. We'll figure it out in a fun way. And that is
Hmm.
what I just practice over and over and over and over again. So I feel
Oh.
like I I feel like that is so top of mind for me all the time that I get into the practice of just seeing everything as systems, always
Hmm.
wanting to deconstruct the patterns that cause the results around me or the results in people's lives. And that is
Hmm.
really cool vantage point because you see how you can create any outcome with the right inputs.
Wow, that's pretty deep. And I did want to acknowledge you because you're the person that like introduced me into the world of having an EA. And dude,
Yeah.
it's been like there's no way I would have been able to take 16 days off to travel like solo road trip if I didn't have like, well, at this point now I have 7 people that I delegate to. So like they're just essentially running the business for me. And my VA is like she's like the most beautiful soul who just has like a heart of gold, and like we're so close that like I feel like she knows more about me than like most of my best friends do, right? It's just like yeah, and it's like such a beautiful relationship because like I know I always joke, I'm like, yeah, if you ever left, like I'd be screwed. Like I wouldn't even know what to do, And she's like, I'm never leaving. And I'm like, well, we'll see,
Like, please don't actually.
Yeah,
That's a
yeah. But it's like to your yeah, it's like you're the person that introduced me to this like beautiful world of like I can't even like describe it, but it's just been so amazing. Like I feel like I have time to like to do everything I want to do, and I just have so much extra time. And I felt bad because today I was trying to like teach her like critical thinking, and I'm like, am I trying to outsource too much now? And then I felt bad because I think I almost like made it feel better. I'm like, hey, like in Asia, do they like not teach critical thinking as a skill? I don't get why so difficult sometimes like to do this like more heavy like creative type of out of the box type of like
Mhm.
endeavors, right? And
Yeah.
she's like, yeah, honestly, like we don't like we just learn how to like read out of a book and memorize things, and like it's just more of like book smart, right? And I'm like, yeah, and I was like, I don't want to make you feel bad. I'm just genuinely curious, right? Because like for me, like, but then I was like analyzing myself. Okay, well, I studied for 300 hours to get good at this one skill that I'm trying to teach you. It's like, how do I expect you to learn that within like just, a handful of interactions, right? So it's like I also need to be patient with her as well.
Mm-hmm. There's so many avenues we could go down in that conversation. That's such an area of interest for me. Um, but when it comes to working with someone, especially if English is their second language, and
Yeah.
especially a lot of these virtual executive assistants, first of all, many of them have never worked with a North American before. So there's this insane
Mm,
level of culture shock that we need to be aware of that's happening, where they're trying
mm,
as much as possible to see through the eyes of this human on the other side of the earth.
mm. Yeah.
And they're going, okay, what is this person like? How do they want me to act? They're trying to pick up the breadcrumbs and pick up the cues. And it's just a whole new world.
Mm,
It's like a virtual reality where they're trying to live in your
mm.
world.
Yeah, that's
Mm.
true.
That's fascinating. But another thing that's interesting is if you think about the feedback loop that you have with her, where you
Hmm.
wanted her to do this kind of tricky critical thinking assignment for you, and it didn't
Hmm.
quite go the way that you wanted it to go. But if you think about it almost as machine learning,
Mm.
and you create an advice loop,
Hmm.
right? And you give her positive tactical feedback anytime that she's
Hmm.
anywhere near on the right track.
Hmm.
Then if she's anywhere where she's not quite there, you go, ooh, okay, great. This is a perfect example. When this happens, what if you think about it like this, right?
Hmm.
So one thing that I'll have um, my clients do all the time is we'll create a big board called if this then that. It's a big if this then that board. We'll
Hmm.
do it in Trello, or we'll do it in Notion or Asana with columns. So it'd be like if this then that.
Hmm.
Calendar management, inbox management, travel management, these
Hmm.
different areas of responsibility that your executive assistant owns. And then
Hmm.
anytime you get to a little situation where there was an edge case moment and you wish they'd done
Hmm.
something differently, they did this, and man, I wish they'd kind of done it this way instead. What if you try sending her a voice memo in that moment and you say, hey, totally understand why you made XYZ judgment call. I really appreciate that you were trying to, make sure that I had enough time to have dinner with my wife. And so you wanted to move this and this around. Next time this
Hmm.
happens, though, what A plus would look like is if you did this.
Hmm.
Could you go into our if this then that board and under the calendar management section, just add that in and then shoot me a screenshot? Let me know if you have any questions. So now
Hmm.
she's developing this Rolodex of preferences so that
Yeah, I guess I hear what you're saying. Like, don't get me wrong, she's freaking brilliant. Like, she's really smart. Like, she's like getting her PhD. Like, she's about to go to get her PhD, so like super
yeah.
smart. I think what I'm thinking about is like as like a CEO of a company, right? I feel like we have a lot of like we have to think a lot. There's like a lot of like moving pieces, and it's like almost like I'm trying to outsource like my role, like
Right. Okay, that's
right.
interesting.
So it's
Mhm.
like so like for instance, it's like all right, like it took me probably 500 hours to like figure out how to analyze like YouTube and then figure out, okay, these are great topics that have a potential to go viral, right? Well, how do I like outsource that to some, you know what I mean? Like it's like
Mm.
it took me literally 500 hours, right? And that's me caring about this. Like I don't know if she necessarily cares about it. Like I think she cares about doing a good job and like, has high standards, but like like I guess what I'm so as well, right, is just whenever there's systems like SOP, like in my Notion, I call it SOPs. It just makes it a lot easier because then I can delegate, I can streamline everything. Because this is my first time really being like the CEO of my own company, right? So, or this is my first time having so many people that I'm like quote unquote managing and people that rely on me. So I'm usually the bottleneck, right?
Mm.
So it's like it's weird because I have to like take everything that I know and try to put it in like an SOP that I'm like, oh, I've never done this exercise before. But it's like super interesting because I'm like, oh, like I guess I can outsource like this thing that I thought was like impossible to delegate.
Yeah. 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 One way to look at it is that you're the architect and she's an awesome carpenter, but she's not
Hmm.
going to design the blueprint, right? She needs at least
Exactly.
to
Yeah.
co-create the blueprint with you. Otherwise,
Yeah.
you'll make something, but it's not necessarily
Well,
the dream house
well,
you have in mind.
right. And I think that's it, right? Because I think like being an architect is like a very unique skill, right? I think we're visionary, like both you and I are visionaries. Like we're good at like, there's certain things like right. And I get it because like certain people are just really good at like attention to detail and like the things that she's good at, I'm not good at. Right. So it's like certain things like, but I can't expect to teach someone how to architect, right? Or how to like be creative. Like I do think that's like and that's also like, I think in America, we're almost like taught like this is like something that Americans are good at, right? We're almost like because we celebrate individualism and creativity, like we are able to like think outside of the box and be a little bit more um like creative in that sense as well.
You could have her do the artist's way, by the way. This 12-week creativity experiment, this 12-week
Huh.
creativity course, would be an amazing way for her to
Ah, okay.
everybody's creative. Everybody's creative. People can get blocked.
Yeah,
People can get blocked.
right.
So if you have her, for example, just assign it for her to read this book and do these assignments, see what happens. That could be
Ah,
nice to
interesting.
try. You could
Huh.
also do something with her where every week she brings you 20 cool ideas for your business.
Right, right.
And
That's what
just,
we're doing now.
oh,
Yeah.
that's really good. That's really smart. I love that you're doing that. And
Yeah.
gas her up on the things that you thought were really awesome. Doesn't mean that you're implementing anything.
Yeah. I,
Just to
yeah, I do think like any other, it's like positive reinforcement is always like
it's
still
all
worth it, right? It's like yeah, that's a good point. I think I would say I'm pretty good at it for the most part, but sometimes like after a while, right? It's like week 10, week 15, it's like then I take it for granted. But yeah, I do think that needs to be like a regular practice.
also though, there's the book that I'm reading right now is Traction about the entrepreneur operating system. And
Mm,
it talks about um, thinking about who's leading the company falling into these two categories. You have the visionary and the integrator.
mm,
So the integrator is that nuts and bolts mind. It's the person that's, making sure that everything's happening to a T, things are
mm,
getting executed on reliably. It's the CEO role. And then
mm,
the visionary is more of the founder role where you are an
mm,
idea machine. You're just coming up with a
mm,
million ideas all the time. And
mm,
you're very proficient and very capable of doing all the integrator CEO type
mm.
stuff. But who I know you to be is the visionary. You're just an idea machine, right? So maybe
For sure. Yeah.
that's you need more someone like her And then you need thought partners to bounce ideas off of when it comes to visionary stuff.
Yeah, yeah, it's really like taking a life of its own, right? I do feel like I've been blessed to be surrounded by so many interesting people. So it's just like, yeah, I mean, I never even thought I would like start my own company. So it's just like, it's just crazy. For anyone who hasn't like taken that leap of faith yet, I would totally recommend it. It's so cliche, but everyone's always like, oh yeah, like when you find something you love, like you never have to work a day in your life, and I'm just like, yeah, okay. But now I'm like, oh, that's what people are talking about. Like this is awesome. Like
Wow.
it's just I feel very blessed for sure.
Amazing. That's amazing. And can we also acknowledge that it might not always feel like that, and that's okay.
Mm.
It's okay.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And like, when it's like building something, at least I get to choose the people I work with and interact with every day, right? And I think that's like the biggest difference because it's like, oh, I get to assemble my dream team and like I get to choose. So it just feels a lot more like just hanging out with friends.
What pieces of advice do you have for someone who's in a corporate job? They have this idea, they've taken some steps on it already. They're ready to launch a company. What advice do you have for them, especially during, let's say, their first 6 months in this kind of, oh my God, I took the leap.
Hmm.
What can you advise them on how they can think about it, how they can frame it, what they should remember?
I like what you said about delegating everything as soon as possible. Like I think that's like the smartest thing ever. It's like copywriting. This guy's really good at like copywriting. Like let him do it. This video edit. Like so for me, it's just like just trust that your team has your back.
Mm.
And that just gives you like a lot more freedom and flexibility. And yeah, I mean it sounds cliche, right? But like also don't like I think me especially, I'll just speak for myself, but I see a lot of this happening to a lot of people as well. I think we over ask people for advice, and as a leader, as like the CEO of your company, you just gotta like trust your vision and your intuition, and just execute, right? If I ask a billion people, even though some of my friends are super successful, have sold, have made millions and millions of dollars, like they're so different. Like we have different skill sets, they have a different vision. So I think instead of I would say I would go as far as like don't ask for any advice at all, just because like when you're a public figure, you're gonna get a billion comments anyway. It's like everyone and their mom has an opinion, and it's like, and sometimes like it's hard to like not take what they say seriously because like they're coming from a place of trying to protect you, right? But
Mm.
they have a totally different business model or they just don't know what you know, right? So I think I've gone as far as like I don't listen to what anyone says at all, really, like other than the people on my team, right? Because they're the actual ones that are executing on this. But like I've been like pushed and pulled in so many different directions, and like it's actually like really has distracted me from like doubling
Mm.
down on what I know to be true and what I know to be possible.
Mm. Mm-hmm. Yes. Okay. So some of the things that I'm taking from what you just shared. Number one, I'm reminded of the saying, don't take advice from anyone you wouldn't trade places with. And even the people you would trade, not necessarily, of course, we wouldn't trade places with anyone, right? But even those people that you do really look up to,
Mm,
there's something to be said in this book. This book talks about this so much. It talks
mm,
about how power is really cultivated in darkness, right? In
mm,
darkness, in the having a juicy secret of something that you want to create, and you
mm,
keep gathering little clues, you keep gathering little puzzle pieces around you, and you keep building this thing up in yourself and in your mind and in your heart, and actually not telling people about it at first can keep culminating, cultivating that power in you. So
mm,
she explains it like learning how to not just tell people some of these
mm,
vulnerable goals is kind of like
mm,
a gardener learning how to not just keep digging plants up by the
mm,
root before they're fully formed, before they're fully
mm.
growing, it's sort of, sometimes it can be like baking a cake and then you keep opening the oven and checking on it. Having other people
Oh,
look at it. Just
good
leave it
analogy.
closed and let it bake in there, So
Yeah. And even, to add another point to, like, even like people on your team or people that you respect, right? Like I'm very lucky. I have a lot of mentors that have been super successful in creating similar types of communities. But like the, I think it's like I needed to get their validation to tell me that I'm good enough or that I can execute or that I can be just as successful, right? So I noticed that I'm like, oh, like this guy made $3 million and he said I'll be just as successful. I'm like, and then I was like, oh, but that's when I like started getting into motion and that's when I started executing. I'm like, oh, like why did it take for a handful of people for me that I looked up to hear that from in order for me to feel like I can do this, right? So that's like just something to be mindful of. And even people on your team that have like a vision, they're trying to help, right? They obviously like know you pretty well, but they have their lens and their perspectives and their things, and sometimes that could actually to make this more tangible. Like when I first met my general manager, he was like, "Oh, you're in tech sales. Like we have to make a lot of content courses on tech sales because like that's like where the money is at, right?" So I wouldn't say we wasted 3 to 4 months, but we spent a lot of energy like creating that, and then we started to realize like, oh, actually, what I care about is like more than just tech sales, right? It's like self actualization, it's like self love, it's like fulfillment. It's like finding your purpose. Like today I did a workshop with my team to experiment. It's like your legacy workshop. Like what are people gonna say? Like what's the eulogy that you're gonna hear? So they literally wrote their eulogy, and like that's like the shit that I care about. Like I don't care about making 300K in tech sales, right? So um
yeah.
yeah,
Was
this
that
is
was
this
that
is
a Donald Miller workshop?
oh no, I just
Okay.
created it from
Oh,
scratch.
you created it. Amazing. Wow.
Yeah.
Writing the eulogy one is a heavy, that's a really powerful one.
Yeah.
Wow. That's
Well, I did, Abby. This has been amazing. Like we always have the most like interesting conversations, and I'm so happy that we're friends and that we stay in touch. And you're right. Like it doesn't feel like work when we call and we chat for like 3 hours. Sometimes it,
totally.
and yeah, I just love how you're like continuously growing. I have no doubt that you'll be a very, very, very influential coach, executive coach, because like you're coming from a place of genuine like love and authenticity, and it's just refreshing to see someone be so free and so open with their knowledge and their experiences. So yeah, I'm so excited to see what you continue to create, and yeah, definitely we'll have you back. Maybe we could do this like on a regular
I
basis.
would love to. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for always being someone who just brings light into my life. Thank you for being someone who I'm always excited. I'm always so excited to hear what's going on in your world, I reach out to know what's going on over there now. I want to know. I love following the story because you're always striking for the fences. You're always pushing
Oh,
outside your comfort zone. You're always getting uncomfortable on purpose, and you let the people in your life see that. You let people in, you let people witness you while you get uncomfortable. And so it's
hmm.
really fun and really rewarding to be a friend of yours and to be able to be a witness to you. So thank you for always hyping me up, just being like a totally reliable hype friend that I can always count on. Just let's get on a call and we'll just get really excited about what our goals are. It's really it's an
Well,
important thing. Yeah.
amazing. Yeah, and I'll link to your socials, and yeah, Abby's a super interesting person. Not only is she like a what are you like a Grammy award winning music artist, and Yeah,
No,
just
I
all
don't
the
have any Grammys yet, but I'm an artist. I'm a musician, a vocalist specifically, and I do life experiments with people. So you can listen to my music on Spotify. If you want to build a life experiment with me, feel free to just send me a DM on Instagram and you can just type life experiment. My Instagram is Abby Diamond X. So that's ABBY Diamond, like the stone, DIAMOND, and then just an X after it. So you can just shoot me a DM.
amazing. Yeah, I'll definitely post everything. Yeah, I'll post in the show notes and all that. I'll post all that stuff so that way they can check you out and connect with you. And excited to um
Keep
yeah,
building.
continue. Let's do it.
Perfect. Thanks so
All
much.
right.
Wonderful being with you today. Bye, everybody.